Hey y'all, it is Grim. So, I was watching the show The Magicians, right? And I decided that I wanted to make a video because something hit me like really, really hard while watching this episode of The Magicians. And I just needed to just stop and record some feelings that I have. Now, fantasy is favorite one of my favorite subjects in like shows, movies, and books and stuff. But the thing is that as a black person, the two things that really annoy me in fantasy is representation, meaning there's like no black people or black people of color, and fucking time travel. Now, when it comes to fantasy, you will like almost never see black people. Like, you may see maybe like a tan white person or like a racially ambiguous person or something like that. You may see like red and blue people. You may see all these other colors, but very rarely will you see black people, if at all. But when it comes to a specific sector of fantasy, not like sci-fi fantasy, but like, maybe like Norse mythology or Greek mythology and shit like that, it seems like the moment somebody black or a person of color says, so what you're saying is that there's nobody that looks like us in this time, and suddenly all these white people become historians and they tell you, well, it was this and this time, and it couldn't have possibly, they couldn't have possibly been any people of color. Like, never mind that there were like boats and shit. Like, people like had boats and found ways to like bring people and fight like with gladiators and shit like that. But fuck that. And then on top of that, it's like, it's inconceivable for black people or black and brown people to even exist, even in a world that's full of dragons and vampires and satyrs and centaurs and demons and gods and angels and hobbits. They just tell you, I don't know what you're talking about. They couldn't have possibly existed in this world of many mythical beings. So that is something that like really irks me every time, because it's like, white people as a privilege get to pretend that we don't exist, even if we do, and they get to reason why we don't exist or have representation. So this whole like time travel thing, that's like another type of fantasy, right? Like, who wouldn't go back in time and change certain things to make things better for themselves, or go into the future? It all started with this show Travelers, right? Everybody's been bugging me to watch this show. I watched the show. I mean, it wasn't really all that to be like, oh, you gotta watch this show, but I watched it to the end. It was alright, but it was one of those shows that you watch and you do other stuff, and then like interesting things happen. You're like, oh, hold up, let me press rewind, let me find out what happened. It wasn't one of those shows that keep you in your seat. Out of the characters in there were quite a few characters of color. They're black and brown people, but one of the main characters, I keep forgetting this lady's name, but she's a black woman. The person, they went into her body and they're carrying out this mission and everything. Spoiler alert, you guys, there's going to be a couple spoilers throughout here, so if you're watching it and you're sensitive about spoilers, you might want to cut off the video. So anyway, so they transferred her into the body of a black woman, and automatically in the beginning, I'm seeing her. She's like beat the fuck up. She has a baby, and I think like if I remember correctly, she's married, and I was like, oh, okay, they didn't go with the whole like baby mama thing. She's actually married, because you know how that goes, right? But her husband is a cop, and he uses his influence to like to to make it hard for her to move on because he wants them to get back together. And, you know, he's like causing all types of trouble for her. He's beating her up and stuff. And she's like basically running through the show by herself. Most of these characters have families. You know, the white characters, like the teenager, he lives with his parents. The white chick with the disabilities that's living with a social worker, she has somebody that loves her. Even the guy that's in love with the main male character, who's like the FBI, he cannot really be with her because the body that he has inhabited is married to someone else. So she was like kind of the side piece going on, and then it was just like she was by her fucking self, fending for herself pretty much that whole show. But, you know, I was like, okay, you know what, I'm used to this this whole like black woman, strong black woman, loneliness bullshit that these shows tend to put on. And I kind of just like, but, you know, I left it behind. Again, it was an alright show. Watch it if you want. Watch it when you're bored. Trust me on this. I move on to The Magician. And of course, it's like, you know, these kids. It's like a college version of Harry Potter, kind of. And a little bit of like Narnia mixed up in it, right? So I'm like surprised because the cast is like diverse. And the environment is diverse. The principal is black. You see black students. You see brown people like all over. Like one of the main characters, Penny, I believe that he's Indian. He's in it. He's the best character out of this whole freaking show, and he has the best powers. But when it came to time traveling, this is one scene. Again, spoiler alert. This is one scene where, you know, like Quentin, who's this big doofball, he has to try and save. And he like goes back and save everyone. He goes back in time to like 1942 to follow one of the characters, a young version of Jane Chatwin. Okay, cool. But then when I realized, I got like really salty because like they went back in time, had their clothes on. It was relatively empty street, but they were white. And then I was like, imagine if I had went back in time to like 1942 as a black person and walked into a shop or walked into the wrong ass neighborhood. That could be like a total fail for me. That could be my fucking life, like just existing in the wrong time could end my life. And I suddenly got like really salty because I'm like, yo, you know what's so fucked up? Like even in these fantasy stories, white people still have white privilege. Like they have the ability to go to any fucking time that they want to and not have to worry about anything but when they landed, what time period they landed rather, and what clothes they're wearing. Oh, and where the hell they are. And it was just, you know, it's shocking like every single fucking time. Like every single time that, you know, there are some black people that would love to live in certain periods, but there's always that disadvantage, the color of your skin. Now, mind you, like this is something that has been irking me for a hot minute. Like, so Snobby Comic Book Guy got me to watch Doctor Who. I was never really that interested in Doctor Who back when I first started watching. But I started watching on, what was it? I guess it would be number 9. And, you know, I was like, oh, this is really, really cool. Like, I was in love with the Doctor. And I was in love with Rose as a character and stuff. And then comes the companion whose name is Martha. And Martha is my favorite companion because she's gorgeous. She's smart. She thinks for herself. She's like right on par with the wit of the Doctor. And then there was that one episode where I knew the writer was not any fucking shit. It was like, it turned me off from the show. Like I had to stop watching the show for a good 3 or 4 months because I was that tight, and I'm still tight with the way that they treated Martha. The doctor was being chased, and I guess to put it in summary, he had to hide in a certain time, but he had to like lose his memory, and I think they had to put it in like this little like compact thing so that whatever it was, again, I can't remember what was chasing him, but they wouldn't find him, but they went like back to this time where that black people weren't really favored. I mean, they still aren't favored. We still aren't, but she was a maid and everything, and they made a reference to her color. She had to put up with a lot of shit. He didn't remember her, but the way that he talked to her, it was really bad. So the doctor was kind of like in love with this lady, his persona back then, because he didn't remember anything. Martha had to go through all this shit. Finally, she released his old self, and he remembered everything. And Martha was in love with the doctor, like she really had a thing for him. And I know that the doctor fucking knew this. The doctor is not silly. He's not oblivious. He fucking knows that Martha loves him. And instead of like, I don't know, like he doesn't have to love her. Like nobody has to love anybody. But the way it was done, like she sacrificed everything for him. She took that L. She ate that garbage to make sure that he was safe. And then he had the nerve to invite the other lady that he fell in love with. And, he didn't really know her like that because once he gained his memory and whatever of his old self, he invites her on to be a companion as well. And it's like suddenly, he couldn't really open up to Martha, but this chick, he could open up to her. And she went through all that for her. And it was just like, oh my God, like black people in time traveling, we got to go through mad shit and still get the shit end of the stick. So now I just like, I don't know how to feel now. Cause it's like, either way, white people still have this privilege. They have the privilege of either pretending that we don't exist, like y'all can travel any fucking where, even if it's the most like diverse city in the world. In present day, y'all can pretend like people of color do not exist, and y'all don't have to worry about anything whatsoever. But for us, once we go back to a certain time, everything goes downhill for us. Like, I wonder if, during these scenes where stories on if, they go back in time, I wonder if they never really go back in time when they have that one black person or that one black person and one brown person or whatever, because they have like a quota on how many black people and brown people can be on the screen at the same time as white people, right? I wonder if they're just lazy and they do not want to have to deal with the reality of if they all go back together in time. Let's say for the magicians, if they go back together in time, they would come across these issues where the white characters would probably have to separate from the black characters, and then they can't stick up for their friends lest they be a nigger lover because that's what they called them back in the day, white people who defended black people and brown people. I don't know, like I just feel like it's really lazy to just exclude things, but I don't know, it's like it's whatever. I just noted that privilege of getting to do whatever you want. You get to be wherever you want and whenever you want. But as a person of color, we have to think of these things. And you know what? That's something that I mentioned with Doctor Who. A lot of people were like, yo, we would like Idris Elba to be Doctor Who. That's probably never ever gonna happen, because unless the Doctor stays in different worlds in the future and probably present day, he can't go in the past, because what good is that gonna do him if he can't go wherever the fuck he wants to go because he's a black person? I don't know. So that's all I wanted to say. I am still fucking grouchy about this because I want to be able to live in fantasy and not be reminded that I'm still not wanted. And that not being reminded that just because of the color of my skin, I have restrictions on where I can appear, whether it be fantasy or real life.